the likelihood of him being eroded by a Jin's minion significantly increased, which left me stunned because this change seemed a bit extreme. But of the two I needed to pay attention to, the first was Jaden on the same team. His character was bullying the weak and despising everyone, but the window indicated his potential for growth had increased, leaving me puzzled about what it represented. During the temporary team merger, both team leaders introduced their members, but Yuyona mistakenly pronounced my name wrong. Jaden seemed normal for now, but the key person was Team 3's Sven, a student from abroad enrolled at the Cube. Like many students, Sven admired Chai Nayan and aspired to be among the top talents of the Cube. However, contrary to his wishes, faced with the more exceptional prodigies of the Cube, he remained just an average student. Repeated failures made him feel inferior and frustrated. Eventually, to gain power, Sven sold his soul to a Jin in exchange for strength. However, the Windows alert just told me that in this dungeon raid, Sven might prematurely awaken as a Jin. Next, we started entering the dungeon for the simulated raid. I needed to stay vigilant, especially about Sven's movements. In such an environment, any anomaly could lead to severe consequences. You can't let your guard down like this in the dungeon. I briskly swatted off Jaden's hand. Seeing this, Jaden seemed to understand, commenting on my bad temper and how it's no wonder many rumors were circulating about me. Hearing this, I felt a surge of anger. Recently, my reputation at the Cube Academy had been very poor, mainly due to rumors from the world class claiming I used my student status to intimidate and threaten others outside, and other rumors about my indulgences in city pleasures every weekend. I knew all these were the doings of Shinjonghak and his group. Although I gained a lot of SP because of this, the team members treating me as if I were invisible was probably due to these reasons. As we waited for the team ahead to enter, everyone in the team seemed cheerful, except for me. The dungeon was as vast as the instructor had described, and after a few minutes of walking, everyone stopped due to many forks in the path. Yuyona and Jaden were discussing on the spot. Jaden originally wanted their team's sharp-sensing archer to choose, but I had already suggested taking entrance number 6, which displeased Jaden. Unexpectedly, Yuyona decided to listen to me and immediately chose the 6th path, telling Jaden, although Kim Hajin might not be much, his eyes are still pretty good. I didn't mind. Thanks to her, I could finally enter the fork that would lead to encountering Chai Nayan's team as I wished. If Sven really makes a pact with a Jin here today, Chai Nayan alone won't be able to withstand it. If she gets into trouble, all subsequent plots will be thrown into chaos. Eventually, Jaden also agreed to take Route 6. Along the way, he quietly mocked me for seeking attention, but I simply told him, you should think about how to deal with the monsters ahead instead. As soon as I said this, everyone was puzzled because it was pitch black ahead and nothing could be seen. At that moment, another archer in our team stood up and shot a light arrow into the interior. Under the illumination, a low intermediate ranked monster, a salamander, was indeed ahead. The students quickly formed a battle formation. Jaden asked if anyone could use water attribute attacks, since the salamander was a fire attribute. Hearing his words, I didn't respond. The magic within the stigma was limited, and I had to save it for the most critical moment. Seeing no one in the team had water attribute magic, Yuyona proposed a direct frontal assault. She took the initiative against the monster, and just as the salamander tried to spit fire, it was swiftly bound by her whip around the mouth. The warriors in the student ranks followed up with attacks, and with everyone's cooperation, the monster was killed within seconds. Yuyona's power was indeed increasing quickly, and the lightning emanating from her whip indicated that she was on the verge of enlightenment. We continued on, and as we moved closer, I could feel the atmosphere ahead becoming increasingly eerie and tense. I had to stay alert, especially as we neared the route leading to Chai Nayan's team, where any anomaly could have severe consequences. I suddenly pushed Yuyona aside, successfully preventing her from getting hurt. A trap was activated. Unaware of the situation, Yuyona coldly told me to let go. Sensing her intent to kill, I quickly stepped back. Just as Yuyona was about to deal with me, other team members noticed an arrow that had penetrated the wall. That was why I had pushed Yuyona. Moreover, when I fell, I saw a new alert. It was an arrow laced with neurotoxin. Compared to Yuyona's luck, Team 3 Sven was not so fortunate, as he was accidentally hit by the poison arrow. Carrying Sven, Chai Nayan was puzzled. In the midst of the battle, an arrow had suddenly flown at them, which couldn't possibly be part of the training. Moreover, Chai Nayan noticed that although it was supposed to be a training dungeon, the monsters inside were abnormally powerful. Meanwhile, my team continued fighting against the monsters. After the salamander, there were many peanut flames, but with everyone's combined effort, the lower tier monsters posed no threat. We soon cleared the area, with only that one poison arrow trap along the way. Just as everyone was ready to charge ahead, intense heat suddenly rose from behind us, startling me with its lethal threat. Turning around, I saw the salamandra we had defeated earlier had revived, and it was about to unleash a firestorm. Before others could react, Salamandra's attack was already launched. However, having sensed it earlier, I immediately acted, channeling all my will through the stigma. The power of the stigma quickly converged, and I transformed the magic into a water barrier in front of us. The flames crashed into the barrier with great force, but the barrier held, shielding Yuyona and the others. The monster, already near death, had little magic left to fuel the flames, and with the fire extinguished, Salamandra truly died this time. Such formidable power sent Hazuki and others into a state of shock. The team guessed that the Salamandra was definitely not a mere monster doll, feeling the intense heat, even without being touched by the flames. Just when I thought things were over, Jaden erupted in anger. He shouted, asking why I hadn't stepped forward earlier when looking for someone with water attributes. Even explaining that it was due to my equipment didn't convince him. Fortunately, Yuyona stepped in to stop our argument. Then someone asked why there were real monsters here, and Yuyona speculated decided that this was the ideal dungeon environment where real monsters could indeed evolve. She then motioned for everyone to keep moving forward, but her suspicion rose when I had just claimed it was the equipment's effect. After all, I couldn't afford even a Desert Eagle, so how could I possibly afford magical equipment? Yet aside from Kim Suho and Shin Jonghak, no new student could imbue magic into equipment. And not only did I know the weakness of the Mountain Tyrant, but I also had the ability to imbue magic properties, yet I deliberately hid my strength. Yona couldn't help but recall what Chai Nayan had said, wondering if Kim Hajin really was a djinn. A while later, Chai Nayan's team had already found a place to rest, but an intermediate level 5 monster, the Magma Golem, was gradually closing in. The enemy might well be the dungeon's boss, and the difficulty felt overwhelming to Team 3. With Sven also urgently needing treatment, it seemed impossible to defeat this type of monster. Despite everyone's reluctance to abandon their own, Sven felt very guilty, blaming himself for carelessly getting hit by the poison arrow. Ever since arriving at the cube, Sven had never had a smooth day, causing him great inner turmoil. At this moment, a seductive whisper resonated within Sven's mind, promising him unmatched power if he made a deal with it. This was exactly what Sven longed for. He didn't want to continue being useless, especially not in front of Chai Nayan. Thus, uncontrollably, Sven accepted the pact with the djinn. The next second, he screamed in pain, causing his teammates to panic, not understanding what was happening to Sven. Seeing their inability to control the frenzied Sven, Chai Nayan instructed other team members to hurry over, but they were too terrified by the monster to move. After searching for a while, the Magma Golem finally located its prey, causing everyone to scatter in panic. The Magma Golem's attack burst forth instantly. Fortunately, Chai Nayan and her team reacted quickly enough to escape the calamity. However, due to the large attack range of the monster, 2 students were unfortunately knocked unconscious. In an instant, Team 3 mostly dispersed. Chai Nayan, carrying Sven, fell to one side. Falling to the ground, Chai Nayan couldn't stop coughing. At this moment, Sven's body began to undergo dramatic changes, twisting grotesquely as the djinn's power corroded his body. As she recovered, she turned around only to find that the Magma Golem had targeted her. The monster in front of her was nothing like the monster dolls described by the instructor. Chai Nayan realized it was a real monster. She had never imagined that she might die in a training exercise. Just as the boss monster's molten lava was about to erupt, a bullet imbued with ice had struck the Magma Stone Golem's neck accurately. The ice magic permeated the monster's body, temporarily freezing it. Chai Nayan was stunned for a moment, and behind the Magma Golem, the shooter was none other than me, who had arrived just in time. Just a few minutes before, our teammate continued forward only to find no way out, blocked by a tall stone wall. Jaden, somewhat angrily, asked me, "Didn't you say that the end of this path leads to the boss monster?" I was puzzled too, because when I used my 1,000-mile eye earlier, there had been no wall, but I still asserted that the boss was behind it and suggested that Jaden try to break the wall. Though unhappy, Jaden swung full force at the wall to get out quickly. The result was obvious. The strong recoil numbed his hands. Even though the attack was imbued with magic, it was ineffective, indicating that the wall was very thick. Just then, Mizuki suddenly called everyone. It turned out there was a crack at the top of the wall, so I suggested crawling through it, but the wall was over 10 meters high, and Jaden complained that it was impossible. I went first to try, as the situation on the other side might not be good. Using my parkour mastery, the rugged wall was like flat ground to me. In no time, I had climbed to the crack. Once I crawled through, a huge vibration suddenly came from the surrounding space, making Jaden even more curious about what was happening on the other side of the wall. Back to the present, the ice on the monster was slowly evaporating, and it had only been a few seconds. Unexpectedly, it was already starting to move again. I quickly shouted at Chai Nayan, telling her not to just sit there, as the pain monster had now targeted me. At that moment, 2 attacks interrupted the Magma Stone monster's actions, coming from the recently dispersed Team 3 members. Seeing her teammates arrive, Chai Nayan finally rallied. She quickly took up her bow, began to draw it with power, and told her teammates to buy her some time. Hearing this, the other students fought valiantly, and unexpectedly, Sven, who had been poisoned, reappeared and even managed to injure the Magma Golem. With several teammates helping each other, the monster couldn't interrupt Chai Nayan's charge. Finally, her killer move was fully charged. Instantly, Chai Nayan released her arrow, powered by strong magic, struck directly at the core of the Magma Golem. The monster screamed, and its body began to crack and finally turned into a pile of rocks, completely dead. Students couldn't believe they had managed to defeat a Magma Golem. After the battle, Chai Nayan waved to check if anyone was injured, while Sven praised her, saying she could even defeat such a strong monster. But I was surprised by his condition. Sven hadn't transformed into a djinn, but I knew he had made a pact with one, and it was only a matter of time before he would be exposed. Seeing me sitting alone to the side, Chai Nayan slowly approached me, looking very shy, and said, "No matter what happened before, thank you for saving me." I was surprised by this new side of Chai Nayan, and I didn't even react at first. Seeing my shocked expression, Chai Nayan immediately became even more embarrassed. I hadn't expected her to apologize to me. On her 6th birthday, Chai Nayan had seen her mother die at the hands of a djinn, which is when she resolved to become a hero, and so, she began training intensely from a young age. Her childhood experiences made it difficult for Chai Nayan to form close friendships. She didn't want to show her vulnerable side to others. Therefore, it was rare for anyone to hear Chai Nayan personally say thank you. She almost never did. Instead of thanks, Chai Nayan often said sorry. That's the character I wrote for her. To avoid an overly awkward moment, Chai Nayan started a conversation. She wanted to know, if I'm so strong, why do I let Shinjonghak and his group bully me? When I admitted that I indeed couldn't beat them, Chai Nayan was puzzled. Given the impressive power power of the gun just now. Then I took out the Desert Eagle. This is a personal weapon, not comparable to the school's training guns. Seeing me use such a weapon, Chinayan quickly checked to see if anyone else had noticed. If the school authorities found out, it would surely lead to suspension. I wasn't worried, because I had learned to conceal weapons within my stigma. Even if discovered, no one could find the weapon. Although I used a special weapon, Chinayan still felt I was very strong. Then she guessed that I must have the talent to enhance firearms. Seeing that I didn't respond, Chinayan walked away with a look of I knew it, saying she wouldn't tell anyone about my use of personal weapons. But halfway through, she suddenly stopped, turned around, and said, "Don't you have anything else to say to me?" I understood what Chinayan meant, but I still said directly that I had nothing else. If I apologized to her now, Chinayan would surely forgive me for insulting her brother. But I couldn't do that. It's better to continue being someone she dislikes by her side. When the time comes, Chinayan might feel a bit better. After all, I have to kill Chai Chin-yun. Seeing Chinayan return, others were curious whether she and I were close, which upset Sven. Not long after, a broadcast informed the students to stop the dungeon assault and quickly evacuate. Since the start of this exercise, the dungeon's cameras had malfunctioned, and the presence of real monsters wasn't detected in time. Fortunately, there were no casualties, so instead of a thorough investigation, the academy chose to calm and compensate the students. In other words, the Jins in high positions at the academy successfully covered up the incident. In the original storyline, a full investigation wouldn't start until after the second plot ended. I need to focus on Sven's condition. The side effects of a pact with a Jin are amplified emotions and obsession. If Sven continues to have chances to be alone with Chinayan, he might erupt due to his emotions getting out of hand. To prevent any issues, I decided to use my computer to monitor Sven and Chinayan's movements. I began by checking Chinayan's chat history. Conversations with others were normal, but I soon found a useful piece of information. Chinayan and Sven's hunting club planned to travel to G province this week. In the original story, Sven made his pact and went berserk during this trip, so I decided to accompany them this week. Just as I made this decision, my watch received a call from someone unexpectedly, Kim Suho. He asked if I was free on Friday and wanted my help with something. Before handling these two matters, I planned to obtain 2 top-tier items from the novel. The next day, I set off directly for Gari Mountain in G province, referred as the Mecca of training for martial artists. Gari Mountain also attracts treasure hunters and adventurers because of its rare items, particularly its famous ginseng. The adventurer introducing me to Gari Mountain is one of them. Even though I tell him my purpose isn't to find ginseng, he remains skeptical. As I walked in, I tripped on a root, but when I looked back, I discovered a ginseng hidden beneath the roots. While this seemed absurd, given my extraordinary luck, it seemed plausible. As I climbed Gari Mountain, I ate the ginseng roots. With my ability to modify settings, eating the root temporarily increased all my improvable stats by 2 points. However, eating part of the ginseng prematurely was somewhat wasteful, as selling the whole root could have easily cleared my debt. But with more pressing matters at hand and needing a boost in strength, I crossed the steep cliffs and reached the hidden Undead dungeon in Gari Mountain. The boss monster was a high intermediate rank level 1 monster, the Death Knight. Although I had already used the ginseng to temporarily enhance my abilities, I probably can't withstand a single strike from it. However, I'm not afraid, as my target today is not the dungeon boss, but the hidden levels within the dungeon. I only need to deal with some low-level undead. With the effect of bullet time, many undead do not pose a significant threat to me. After slaying a swath of them, I used Thousand Mile Eye to check the root, and then it was a merciless slaughter. The growth type equipment ether and Evangel seed. In my original novel, these 2 items helped the Jin Tomer become an executive of depravity. There is no item better than ether to help me grow quickly right now. Soon, I arrived in front of the hidden level. Through the effect of Thousand Mile Eye, I spotted a giant wither tree ahead, under which the witch Evangel sat alone. She is still in her child form and poses no threat. Evangel's appearance is somewhat harmless, but I know that even if I don't act, when the Jins come, the outcome will be the same. Since the witch in her spiritual form is hard to kill with firearms, so I used the stigma to conjure a light attribute mana spear. With the enhancement from the ginseng, I felt like I had become a master like Yuyona and others. As the spear struck the young witch, I noticed she didn't immediately disperse. It took a few minutes for the witch to slowly fade away, finally dissipating into light before me. However, this does not mean that the witch's life has ended completely. The remaining seed is the key item that can give birth to the Witch of Despair Evangel. Next to the seed is the growth type fluid equipment ether. After securing the items, I returned the same way I came. By evening, I had finally returned to the dorm. After successfully equipping ether, due to its ownership effect, all my upgradable abilities increased by 0.6, and this equipment cannot change its owner, an effect that I am very satisfied with. Now I have finally reached the basic level of the cube student. Next, I plan to list the remaining ginseng on Violet Banquet, as I am still quite short on funds. Today's journey was indeed fruitful, with the biggest gain being the Evangel seed right before me. Although the Despair Witch sounds like a villain, if I nurture her properly, she can definitely become a great ally. The method to sprout the seed is simple. Just use a small amount of fresh blood instead of water. However, the witch's temperament is determined by whose blood it is fed, so I must consider carefully. But getting blood from the protagonist group is too difficult, so sprouting will have to wait for now. Exhausted from the day, I prepared to sleep, as there is likely to be a tough battle tomorrow. The next day, members of the hunting club gathered at the mineral spring in G province, and naturally, I was among them. This club organizes a hunting trip monthly, targeting harmful birds and beasts. I'm also somewhat uncertain about today's scenario, mainly because I had only narrated the general ending. The original storyline involved China Na-Yin being seriously injured while Sven dies in the aftermath of a demonic humans rampage. This scenario was designed to make Kim Soo-ho pay more attention to Na-Yin. When many people start to believe that the Jins are targeting her, it's also when Yona gets kidnapped by a Jin. However, this guy Sven hasn't shown any signs of going berserk yet. He can even control a bit of the power of a demon, and I'm almost certain I couldn't beat him with my current strength. If Sven could just die like in the original today, I wouldn't have to worry anymore. While I was keeping an eye on Sven, Na-Yin also noticed that I must be watching them. Even though I had previously seemed indifferent, now I'm conspicuously hovering around them. Na-Yin couldn't help but wonder if I had feelings for her. Seeing this, Sven suddenly reminded her to be cautious, as disappearances had been frequent recently. But when Na-Yin said she didn't think I was that type of person, Sven's look changed instantly. Soon after, the hunting action started. Sven and Na-Yin had a bet on who could catch more, and the winner could make a wish from the loser. When they separated to hunt, Sven finally stopped hiding his abilities and used demonic powers to rapidly devour creatures. Shortly after, Na-Yin's voice carried over. She carried today's trophies, thinking she had won, but upon seeing the prey behind Sven, Na-Yin's eyes widened in shock. Helplessly, she had to honor the bet and then asked Sven what his wish was. Unexpectedly, he suddenly confessed his feelings to Na-Yin. Without any hesitation, Sven's wish was to date Na-Yin. Watching from the shadows, I wasn't surprised at all. The demon Sven made a pact with his one of lust, and his desires had surged since becoming a Jin. When Sven confessed his feelings, Na-Yin decisively rejected him. She explained that anyone would refuse a confession from someone they've known for less than a week. Hearing this, Sven appeared very disappointed. Na-Yin added that she prefers someone stronger than herself, hence she could never accept Sven's feelings. As Na-Yin turned to leave, Sven could no longer control himself and suddenly attacked the unsuspecting Na-Yin. After his frenzied assault, Sven thought he had succeeded, but I arrived in time and blocked most of the damage with an ether shield. I initially wanted to check on Na-Yin's condition, but the demonized Sven was too fast for me to react. Watching me being taken away, Na-Yin attempted to save me, but her bow had already broken. In a moment of crisis, Na-Yin used her hands as a sword, rapidly concentrating magic between her palms. With Sven fully demonized in front, Na-Yin finally stopped hesitating. With her action, powerful magic covered the entire area. In my novel, there are occasionally characters with great potential who fail to realize their abilities due to choosing the wrong weapons, and Na-Yin was one of them. Na-Yin's talent was never meant for the bow. If she used a sword, she would be comparable to Kim Soo-ho. Angrily, Na-Yin swung her terrifying energy sword, and with that strike, the demonized Sven was obliterated, leaving only remains. Na-Yin was also frightened by her own power, and I was curious about the technique she had just used. She didn't know herself. Then she asked how I was, and upon hearing I was okay, Na-Yin finally smiled, but the next second, she felt dizzy and then collapsed in front of me. Later that evening, Na-Yin slowly woke up. Still somewhat groggy, she was startled to find herself on my back. Seeing that she was not waking up, I had decided to carry her down the mountain. Now awake, Na-Yin fussily asked me to let her down, but as soon as she tried to stand, she felt weak and collapsed again. She panicked because she couldn't control her legs at all. Confused, I asked if she had never experienced magic exhaustion. Na-Yin looked bewildered, so I simply explained that her magic was depleted and it would be difficult to move on her own for a while. Following my suggestion, I ended up carrying Na-Yin back. On the way, I asked if she would continue using a bow and arrow, especially given today's events. Na-Yin must be aware that her swordsmanship far surpasses her archery. If she could switch to swordsmanship, with her magic talent surpassing Kim Soo-ho's, she would surely become an absolute dominant force in large-scale wars. However, judging by Na-Yin's angry cursing, convincing her to give up the bow and arrow she had trained with for years seemed unlikely. After a while, we arrived at the transport point. I mentioned I needed to get back before the dormitory curfew, and seeing this, Na-Yin hurriedly asked me to take her along since she still couldn't move freely. The next day, the news of Na-Yin being attacked by a Jin quickly spread throughout the school. After class, I went to keep my appointment. Upon opening the classroom door, Kim Soo-ho, who had asked me to come, was already waiting, but he wasn't alone. Kim Horak, Shin Jong-hak, Yona, and finally Lee Yang-han were there too. It seemed all the major characters have gathered together. The day before the hunting club incident, when Kim Soo-ho asked for my help, he explained that due to the recent increase in disappearances at the Cube and the institution's desire not to involve outsiders, they decided to select a few students from each grade to investigate. Although the school would conduct its own thorough investigation, considering that the perpetrator was likely a student, it suggested an internal investigation by students for quicker results. The representatives chosen for the investigation were Kim Soo-ho, Shin Jong-hak, and Na-Yin, who could also invite others to assist. Kim Soo-ho chose me because he knew I had sharp eyesight, and he mentioned Na-Yin had recommended me. Thinking of the SP I could earn, I agreed to help Kim Soo-ho. Now that everyone had almost arrived, except for Na-Yin who couldn't come due to her injuries, Kim Soo-ho began to share his theory on the case. He first suggested that the perpetrator of the disappearances and the Jin who attacked Na-Yin were not the same. Kim Soo-ho's casual reference to Na-Yin sparked Shin Jong-hak's displeasure. At this, Kim Soo-ho sighed and then used her full name. Overall, Kim Soo-ho believed that the Jin's next target was likely Na-Yin. He asked us if we had any suspects in mind or had noticed anyone behaving strangely recently. Initially, I wanted to observe how the story unfolded without deliberately disrupting the pace, but with 3 disappearances in 2 weeks, much faster than in my original story, I knew the co-author had made modifications. If this continued, the number of victims would multiply beyond expectation. After my recent experience with Chai Na-eun, I decided I could no longer ignore the situation for the sake of the plot. So, I took the initiative to voice my suspicion that the president of the academic club, Yoon Hyeon, was suspicious. The room fell silent instantly. Kim Soo-ho mentioned that Yoon Hyeon was close to the first victim and had already been investigated, proving his alibi. I was explaining that he could have used hypnosis magic to lure the victim to him when Shin Jong-hak immediately countered my point. He does not think a mere hypnosis magic could make the elites of Magician's Cube obediently listen. At this time, Yeona turned the tables on me, finding it odd that despite Yoon Hyeon having an alibi, I persisted in my suspicions. Moreover, Yeona felt that compared to Yoon Hyeon, I was more likely to be the jinn. Her words left me incredulous, and Kim Soo-ho also came to my defense, pointing out that I had teleportation records during the previously assumed times of the crimes. Yeona then used my earlier mention of hypnosis magic as an example, arguing that teleportation records could easily be falsified. Behind us, Kim Horak stood up, ready to physically test me himself. He believed that by beating me up, I would either speak up or transform. Except for Kim Soo-ho, no one objected to this approach, seemingly agreeing with Kim Horak's method. Seeing this, I couldn't help but sneer, and soon I was physically clashing with Kim Horak. Kim Soo-ho quickly intervened to stop us. Once calmed down, I told everyone that if they didn't trust me, they could simply ask Chai Na-eun, as we had both attended the hunting event that day. However, this brought about Shin Jong-hak's displeasure. He was angry about why I would associate myself with Chai Na-eun. While we are all working together to eradicate the jinn, you guys can only play boring pranks. At this, Shin Jong-hak flew into a rage, and Lee Yang-han quickly calmed him down. After reiterating that Yoon Hyeon was a likely suspect, I turned and left. But to everyone's surprise, Kim Horak suddenly attacked me, holding nothing back. Fortunately, my instincts allowed me to dodge the crisis. Turning to face Kim Horak's arrogant demeanor, I drew my pistol, ready to teach him a lesson. Just as we were about to fight, Kim Soo-ho intervened to stop us. He was clearly displeased with Kim Horak and also told Yeona that if there were doubts, they might as well ask Chai Na-eun directly. After a moment of silence, Yeona went to contact Chai Na-eun. I left the classroom without looking back. At that moment, Yeona shared the suspicions with Chai Na-eun. Hearing that they suspected me, Chai Na-eun confidently stated, Kim Ha-jin couldn't possibly be the jinn. When I stepped outside, it was already dark. The events of today had completely stirred all my emotions. Being embroiled in my own fictional world was one thing, but to argue with the characters I had crafted was another. I've been in this world for some time now, missing my parents and friends, longing to return to my home. And if time in the original world was synchronized, how heartbroken my parents must be at my absence. The most critical question was whether I could return at all. In my moment of sadness, a notification popped up saying my resilience had increased. Seeing this, I couldn't help but lament how inappropriate the timing of this message was, but it also reminded me that my resilience had indeed improved. Otherwise, I might have given up searching for a way back by now. They only made me more determined to return home. On the other side, after watching me walk away, Kim Soo-ho slowly returned. Yeona asked Kim Horak if he had used his ability to attack. A marksman like me dodging a close-range ability attack is highly suspicious no matter how you look at it. Just then, Yeona's watch received a message. It was an invitation from Yoon Hyeon asking her to come to the study room before tomorrow's academic discussion to talk about something. Yeona, confident in her abilities, agreed to go, unaware that on the other side, Yoon Hyeon was eagerly anticipating their meeting. The next day, I came to terms with it and didn't dwell on yesterday's events anymore. However, Kim Soo-ho and the others seemed quite concerned about my situation, which made me feel somewhat awkward. I decided not to quibble with my characters anymore. Finding a way back home was the key focus. This morning, Chai Na-eun was already back in class. Seeing her walk with some difficulty, Kim Soo-ho and Shin Jong-hak both rushed to help her, though she refused them both. Soon, it was time for class. The instructor announced that there was less than a week until the midterm exams. The written test would be immediately followed by a practical exam, which consisted of two parts: one-on-one student duels and battles against magicians, summon beasts. Both parts of the exam would be significantly harder than the regular coursework. The written test was not a problem for me, but I anticipated trouble with the duels. In the dueling exam, students each have 3 nomination tickets to choose their preferred opponents. The cube has a scoring system in place. High-ranking students do not gain points by defeating lower-ranked students, but instead lose points. However, some individuals, like Kim Horak, ignore the penalty system. I'm sure he'd love to use his nomination ticket to thrash me. Lately, something else has been on my mind: the presence of Rachel sitting beside me. She usually doesn't talk to me, but ever since the last written test, she's been hovering around me. Previously, Rachel would sit at the back of the class studying alone, occasionally sneaking glances at my notes. So, I decided to tease her a bit. Missing my parents lately, I wrote their names in my notebook, confusing Rachel, who was peeking. By evening, Yoon Hyeon had messaged Yeona again. Thinking it was another typical club discussion, Yeona thought little of it. Upon opening the study room door, she found Yoon Hyeon indeed waiting inside. Noticing no other members were present yet made Yeona curious. Yoon Hyeon assured her they would arrive soon. That's when Yeona noticed the lit aromatic candles, which Yoon Hyeon passed off as something to enhance concentration. During their conversation, Yoon Hyeon suddenly asked about the Jin investigation as he was a second-year representative. Yeona was about to say there was no progress when she blurted out some rash comments instead. Interested, Yoon Hyeon merely waved his finger, prompting Yeona to spill everything about my suspicion that Yoon Hyeon was a Jin with psychological magic. Hearing this, Yoon Hyeon immediately asked if there was any evidence. This question brought Yeona to a moment of clarity. Realizing realizing his mistake, Yunhyan too sensed his error. Yuyona then became wary, understanding that an innocent person's first reaction isn't to worry about whether there's evidence against them. She recognized that something was definitely off with Yunhyan. With the cat out of the bag, Yunhyan no longer pretended, expressing regret while stating, "It was supposed to be a few more people before it was your turn." Suddenly, Yuyona felt dizzy. When she regained consciousness, she found herself bound. Observing her surroundings, she was shocked to discover she was in the second-year students' dormitory. She finally understood that Yunhyan was indeed the djinn behind the student disappearances, and I hadn't been making baseless claims. After calming herself down, Yuyona tried to use her watch to call for help. However, she only struggled for a short while before Yunhyan returned to the dorm. Fortunately, within those few seconds, Yuyona managed to send a message, but surprisingly, she sent it to me. Seeing the number 9 she sent, I was initially confused. Yunhyan, who had just snatched the watch, saw my name on the message and assumed I was the one who had uncovered his identity. Yuyona warned Yunhyan that if anything happened to her, the investigation team would find out soon enough, but Yunhyan didn't care. He planned to leave the cube immediately after today. His words infuriated Yuyona to the extreme, but her expression seemed to please Yunhyan. Yunhyan revealed that he was following the instructions of the demon Lilith, which is why he targeted Yuyona. Meanwhile, I had realized Yuyona's intention, so I quickly activated the Book of Truth, found Yuyona's location, and set out immediately. 10 minutes later, under the continuous influence of Yunhyan's psychological magic, just as Yuyona seemed about to succumb, she would firm her resolve once more. Yunhyan couldn't help but marvel that despite his efforts, he hadn't brainwashed her yet. Although Yuyona struggled every time she awoke, Yunhyan still believed that under Lady Lilith's power, she could never escape. However, in the next second, Yunhyan was suddenly shot. Unlike ordinary magic bullets, this one caused him immense pain. The sudden turn of events raised Yuyona's hopes, while Yunhyan writhed in agony on the ground. Finally, my voice slowly came through the smartwatch. I wanted to know how Yuyona felt now, reminding her that she had doubted me before and now she was the one captured. Yunhyan, also hearing my voice, cursed at me. Realizing he was trying to delay to heal his wound, I playfully reminded him not to waste his effort, as the bullet that hit him had special effects. Yunhyan thought I was hiding and attacking from the shadows, so he started attacking wildly around him, inadvertently injuring Yuyona in the process. Seeing Yunhyan continue his frenzy, I calmly told him no need to look further. I was in a place far from him. Several more bullets hit Yunhyan. At that moment, I was hundreds of meters away in the bushes, with my Desert Eagle transformed into a sniper rifle. Long-range shooting was indeed good. I also loudly told Yuyona that the bullets she had given me were probably going to run out today, and if she had any conscience, she should prepare better ones for me next time. While speaking, I reloaded, and Yunhyan tried to flee. After emptying all my reserves, I finally relaxed. I asked Yuyona if she was alright, and told her to take a nap, as the investigation team would arrive soon. Hearing this, Yuyona no longer forced herself to stay awake and soon fainted. Her last words seemed to be a thank you to me, but spoken so softly that I couldn't hear them from afar. The next morning, Yuyona slowly opened her eyes. She found herself in the academy's medical room and noticed Kim Suho sitting by the bed, peeling an apple. Suddenly sitting up, Yuyona curiously asked why he was there. The investigation team is taking turns looking after you. Yuyona didn't understand why they all came. Hearing this, Kim Suho explained that he and Shin Jonghak felt responsible for Yuyona's injuries. In short, they felt they hadn't protected her well enough, and the investigation team was sorry. But Yuyona didn't see it that way, thinking the incident was her own fault. She then inquired if that person had come. This puzzled Kim Suho, unsure who she was referring to. Seeing this, Yuyona quickly turned her head away, not mentioning my name. At noon, I received a message from Yuyona. She expressed her gratitude and assured she would repay the favor. After eliminating the djinn, I also earned a large amount of SP, completing the long-range shooting task, and my master marksman reached mastery grade 7. Compared to previous actions, this time I gained the most SP. Personally, eliminating a main storyline antagonist yields a substantial reward. Although I used many SP to enhance my ability for long-distance shooting of Yunhyan, the most important thing was that I successfully rescued Yuyona. At that moment, someone called my name in the restaurant. Yesterday, I had contacted Park Soo-hyuk to meet. Unexpectedly, as soon as he approached, Park Soo-hyuk immediately knelt down. He worried I wanted to cancel the contract and pleaded for me to reconsider. Seeing this, I helplessly explained that wasn't the case. I had called him today for one reason only. I saw great potential in SH Entertainment, so I planned to invest money in them. Hearing this, Park Soo-hyuk was still slow to react. As for the money I put forth, it was from the ginseng I had sold on the Violet Banquet for a whopping $400 million. I split this money into 2 parts, using most of it to continue purchasing shares of the Packhorse Masters and planning the rest for investing in SH Entertainment. After all, their potential, in the long run, is no less than that of the Packhorse Masters. Seeing me ready to invest $150 million, Park Soo-hyuk was very flustered, stating he couldn't shamelessly accept such a large sum. Again, I insisted Park Soo-hyuk take it, emphasizing that investing this money was also about growing together. I also advised him to buy a decent magic bag and a high-utility vehicle when he returned, to better facilitate their work. After discussing the cooperation, as it was nearly afternoon, I then parted ways with him. At the same time, in an abandoned factory somewhere, a phantom-like shadow slowly emerged from the ground, finally revealing a young boy. He asked the leader what to do next now that the Packhorse Masters had gone public. The leader above him had only one answer: to grab the item and ignore the rest. The boy also had some news to share, including that someone had been continuously shamelessly buying up shares of the Pack Horse Masters. The second piece of news was that there were several new interesting homepages on the Violet Banquet, and the boy found one called the Truth Agency suspicious because it claimed to answer any question. He wondered whether to try posting a commission, but was stopped by the leader. From the leader's mouth, it was learned that the boy's name was Drun. Seeing the leader appear somewhat irritable, Drun changed the topic and then mentioned the upcoming midterm exams at the Cube, noting that the chameleon troupe needed to pay attention to Kim Suho and Shin Jonghak, and the leader herself wanted to personally observe to see if there was anyone useful. As days passed, the Cube's midterm practical exams finally arrived. The campus would be fully open to various guilds and associations and employers to observe, and the students' parents would also attend. With people from around the world gathered inside, the vibrant atmosphere resembled that of a festival. Many high-ranking students of the Cube had many followers on social media, and these people would also come to watch, so seeing any type of person on campus wouldn't be strange. I then picked up the drone given by Park Soo-hyuk to start monitoring the school, also as a precaution. After the drone flew out, someone accidentally bumped into me. Just a glance at her startled me because I recognized her as the captain of the chameleon troupe. I knew the captain would come to today's exam, but I hadn't expected to run into her. However, I had been pondering the captain's setting for too long. I had to say something, otherwise I would appear very suspicious. Struggling to find words, I blurted out. I regretted it immediately after saying it, and the captain just rolled her eyes at me. Fortunately, she didn't say much and quickly turned and walked away. But things didn't go as smoothly as I thought. It wasn't long before the captain contacted Drun, because the person who had just brushed past her seemed immune to the perception blocking item. Seeing her true face directly, the captain instructed Drun to investigate my identity. Unfortunately, I was unaware of this on the other side. Many people come to recruit students in the novel's storyline, but the chameleon troupe only targeted 2 individuals. Ultimately, after observing, Kim Suho found their beliefs different, so the people from the chameleon troupe noted Shin Jonghak and left. Their infiltration into the Cube wasn't a serious issue, but I worried that if the storyline changed again and they encountered the exam security heroes, it wouldn't just be a few people dying. There are many security heroes inside the Cube, some even top-tier heroes. Oh Jun-hyuk and Seo Yangji have already patrolled the Cube several times without spotting anything suspicious. Oh Jun-hyuk didn't believe anyone would dare cause trouble during this time, but after the two walked past, a man, also a member of the chameleon troupe, stepped out beside them. Hearing that someone could ignore the siren necklace's perception blocking intrigued him. After watching a stream of seemingly fragile students, the man was utterly bored. Just as he thought about meeting up first, Drun internally scoffed at his simple-mindedness. As for the captain, she stopped the man because the confrontation was about to start, and there was no need for a test to know the other party's strength. This morning, the second day of the competition, Kim Horak used his nomination ticket, and naturally, he chose me as his opponent. As I was entering the arena, someone called out to me. It was Yuna. At that moment, she ordered her subordinate to bring over a box containing 100 of the highest quality bullets. Although they weren't needed for the exam, she told me to take them home and use them freely and to contact her anytime if I needed more. Yuna also mentioned that mere bullets were not enough to repay the debt of saving her life. They were just a small gift she was giving me today. Moreover, when the school authorities asked her to provide testimony about the death of the Jin, she didn't mention my supporting fire. I was very grateful to Yuna for keeping my secret. If the news of my shooting in Hyan had spread, I might have faced trouble since none of Lilith's Jins are ordinary. At this moment, Yuna also said she knew I had my reasons for hiding my strength, but continuing to hide it would make it difficult to pass the practical exam. Seeing my confusion, Yuna curiously asked if I didn't know who my opponent was, but I had guessed as much when I arrived, and I was prepared to settle things properly with him. Meanwhile, Drun had already clarified my situation for the captain. In this world, Kim Ha-jin comes from an orphanage with no parents or close friends. He entered a military academy at the age of 6 and came to the Cube with a mediocre performance and a debt of $300,000. These were all the details Drun found out. After hearing the report, the captain was even more puzzled. Such an ordinary person, why could he look directly at her true face despite the perception blocking item? As the captain pondered, another member of the chameleon troupe finally found her. The man was Cheek Jungyang of the chameleon troupe. Hearing the captain say he was late, Cheek Jungyang quickly explained that he had been scouting for talent as instructed. When the captain asked about the results, Cheek Jungyang said they were all weaklings. Any one of them would be knocked out with a flick on the forehead. His response left Drun speechless because the captain was interested in potential, and this year's most promising talent was in the first year. So Drun suggested that the captain and Cheek Jungyang check it out themselves, especially since the first year Kim Ha-jin's contest was about to start. Remembering the previous encounter where she was seen through, the captain took Drun's advice. As the grand opening ceremony took place, the arenas of the Cube were bustling with excitement. Oh Jun-hyuk and Seo Yangji, who were in charge of the second arena, had now arrived at the observation stand. As they chatted, Seo Yangji suddenly sensed something unusual originating from Cheek Jungyang sitting at the opposite side of the arena. She hinted at Oh Jun-hyuk that the man seemed to be smiling at them continuously. Oh Jun-hyuk thought he was just a fan and didn't pay much attention. After the ceremony, the contest officially began. The first to enter was Kim Horak of the combat department, ranked 19th among first-year students. Although far behind the top 6, his overall strength was also commendable. Seo Yangji was surprised to see that Kim Horak's opponent was Kim Ha-jin, ranked only 934. Looking at the fiercely determined Kim Horak, I couldn't help but chuckle. Aren't you looking a little too fierce? Let's take it easy. Hearing this, Kim Horak Horak became even angrier. His main skill was protective energy, which could release magic power from his body to form a transparent shield, so the training bullets couldn't harm him at all. The most important thing was to keep Kim Horak at a distance, because if he got close, I would indeed be in real danger, as he was a formidable close-range fighter. The match started, and Kim Horak charged at me instantly. His tactic was correct to close the distance between us. The next moment, I activated bullet time. After a period of diligent training and enhancement, bullet time had extended to last for a minute, allowing me to keep up with Kim Horak's movements. However, his tremendous destructive power made me realize he was like a tank. Next, Kim Horak chased me frantically across the platform, while I utilized Thousand Mile Eye and bullet time to seemingly narrowly dodge his attacks time after time. As he continued to pursue, I suddenly pulled out my handgun and aimed. Kim Horak seized the opportunity to get close, and at the same time, my bullet also fired. But he didn't care at all. He thought I was foolish to think his protective energy would fail. He believed he could easily deflect such bullets and didn't even need to defend. However, things went far beyond his expectations. Not only did he fail to block the shot, but the bullet also successfully penetrated his protective energy. The sudden change in the arena made the audience disbelieve their eyes, as the well-known protective energy was pierced by a mere training handgun. Kim Horak on the platform was stunned, only the severe pain in his shoulder making him realize that his energy had indeed been penetrated by a small bullet. The next second, Kim Horak reacted because he heard the sound of my trigger pull. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Facing my rapid fire, Kim Horak had to protect his vital body parts, and this was exactly the method I had thought of to deal with him. Kim Horak thought he could deflect bullets. He was very wrong, because I had infused the bullets with the power of my stigma, and they were also bullets with anti-demon power. Now that Kim Horak's offensive had ended, he faced my relentless barrage. After dodging all the way, Kim Horak finally couldn't stand it, using his full strength to try to use debris to make me lose balance. This strike seemed to slow down my attack, but as I jumped to dodge the debris, I suddenly warned Kim Horak that I was about to throw a knife next. Seeing this, he didn't dare to take it head-on and didn't use the opportunity to close in on me, fearing the knife might also have a special effect. Kim Horak chose to dodge directly. I smirked and said that was actually just a bluff. During his dodging, I had already rapidly reloaded my handgun, and then came another round of quick shooting. This time, Kim Horak had absolutely no room to dodge or defend, and just like that, he took all the damage. After a round of shooting, he was already kneeling on the ground in severe pain. I approached at a leisurely pace, stopped, and then raised the handgun on the spot. Without his protective energy, Kim Horak was like a lamb to the slaughter. This spectacular fight made the audience even forget to breathe. Finally, under everyone's gaze, I pulled the trigger of the handgun, but the sound of an empty gun echoed through the entire arena. Kim Horak's eyes were filled with disbelief, and the audience finally took a breath. Oh Junhyuk, in surprise, could it be that Kim Hajin has no bullets left? At this moment, Kim Horak was also covered in wounds. As everyone wondered who the winner of the fight was, Kim Horak finally stood up, deciding to make a last stand. At this, I just smiled slightly, thinking this was enough. I threw away the handgun and told the referee that I surrendered. My voice echoed in the silent arena. The people on stage did not react immediately until the referee stutteringly declared the duel over, and the victory belonged to Kim Horak. Compared to the shock of the audience, my demeanor was calm. Kim Horak was furiously cursing, demanding I come back, while I turned around and left without looking back. At this point, Oh Junhyuk asked his companion what they thought. Seo Yanji's view was simple. She thought I performed very well, whereas Kim Horak was too hasty and did not use martial arts to approach step by step, instead opting to use the energy-consuming protective energy to respond. My performance intrigued Seo Yanji because my firing speed was beyond normal, and my dynamic vision was too exceptional, capable of tracking the movements of a martial arts student. She was also surprised that I could surround bullets with compressed magic. Oh Junhyuk and Seo Yanji concluded that this was why the bullets could penetrate the protective energy, but I was just a student, and yet I could compress magic to this density. Various guilds and organizations were hurriedly contacting their superiors to report my performance. By evening, all the duels for the day had pretty much ended. After leaving, Cheek Jungyang contacted his partner, saying he didn't like that guy named Kim Hajin, a little guy who hides far away and shoots. He didn't understand why the captain would want him to pay attention to such a person. Didn't you notice the anti-magic power? Cheek Jungyang told him that this has nothing to do with strength. Hearing this, Drun finally realized that he just simply dislikes shooters. In Cheek Jungyang's eyes, a real duel is about fighting to kill the opponent, staking one's life. Drun didn't bother to argue with Cheek Jungyang and instead inquired about Kim Suho and Shin Jonghak's matches. For these two, Cheek Jungyang acknowledged their strength. Shin Jonghak's savage spear technique made a deep impression on him, with no probing but direct attacks aimed at the opponent's vitals. He said he liked Shin Jonghak. As for Kim Suho, Cheek Jungyang found him a bit special. Kim Suho's swordsmanship also surprised Cheek Jungyang. It was indeed as elegant as rumored, like a sword dance refined over countless years. But after watching the match, Cheek Jungyang always felt that Kim Suho was hiding his true colors. However, the current strength of Kim Suho and Shin Jonghak was not enough to make his hands itch. At this time, Drun asked him to also make a note of Kim Hajin. Although dissatisfied, Cheek Jungyang complied because the captain had requested it. Just then, a security guard from the cube spotted him and began to drive him away. The next second, Cheek Jungyang suddenly flicked his finger at the guard's head. Hearing the commotion over the phone, Drun asked if he had killed the person. Cheek Jungyang casually admitted it and asked Drun to keep it a secret for him, because if the captain found out, he might get killed. As for the captain, she had already arrived arrived at a deserted place, recalling past events and the betrayal she had suffered, as well as the vow to avenge someone. The captain, having come to her senses, contacted Drun to have him investigate Kim Suho and Shin Jonghak, and also Kim Hajin. As for me having the anti-magic power capable of breaking through magic constitution, the captain put me first on the list to investigate, but Drun thought it inappropriate to act on such scant information about me. The captain reassured Drun, because tomorrow she planned to meet Kim Hajin herself. The next match was between seed players, with the first match featuring Rachel versus Chai Nayun. Even more spectators than on the first day attended, including the top guild from each country, Creator's Sacred Grace. Everyone was eagerly anticipating the battles between seed players, and naturally, I was among them. However, today's match is supposed to end in a disastrous defeat for Chai Nayun. After all, the bow and arrow really didn't suit her talent, so she couldn't possibly defeat Rachel. As the battle began, Chai Nayun appeared confident. Her recent training had significantly boosted her abilities. After releasing her magic, Chai Nayun shot an arrow that instantly transformed into a myriad of light arrows aimed at Rachel. But Rachel was quick, easily dodging most of the light arrows, and the last one was blocked with her sword. Watching her all-out attack effortlessly neutralized, Chai Nayun couldn't believe it. Rachel then gradually closed in on her using her movement techniques. While I was thoroughly enjoying the match, someone came up behind me and sat next to me. The arrival of the captain was a surprise. She is a notorious blacklisted wanted criminal of the Hero Association. She's the infamous leader of the Chameleon Troop, a formidable individual who hides behind countless names and identities. But in the next second, the captain was doused with cola when a man behind her stumbled. This scared me half to death. If the captain lost her temper, it would be the end. After Rachel's victory on stage, the captain also took my handkerchief to dry her hair. Hearing her say thank you, I hurriedly said it was no problem. Shortly after, the captain explained her purpose. She had watched my duel with Kim Horak and wanted to get to know me, then handed me her business card. But looking at the name on it, Li Xiaofeng, I knew it wasn't her real one, just one among her many identities. I curiously inquired about the captain's intentions, but she didn't tell me and got up to leave. The captain said if I wanted to find her, I could contact her directly. Watching the captain leave, I couldn't figure out why she would seek me out. In the afternoon, Kim Suho's match also ended. He easily defeated the 8th rank Yohei. On the way out, many people were still discussing today's matches. I retrieved the drone I had released and prepared to return to the dorm to check if anything unusual had occurred in the school today. However, on my way back, I noticed I suddenly heard someone quietly crying. Looking down at the bushes next to me, it turned out to be Chai Nayun, who had hidden and quietly cried after losing the match. This is part of the storyline. In the original story, it was Kim Suho who happened to pass by and comforted and encouraged her during her moment of despair. It was this incident that began to endear Chai Nayun to Kim Suho. But now that the antagonists have all been strengthened, the light encouragements in the novel like Kim Suho's to not give up are of no help to the current Chai Nayun. In Kim Suho's life, giving up is not in his vocabulary. He never persuades others to give up, so until the end, Chai Nayun never gave up on archery. Just then, I thought of a way to give advice to Chai Nayun without disrupting their encounter. I decided to send some messages to console her. Seeing the message was from me, Chai Nayun was initially puzzled, but the content made her eyes widen because I directly told her that sword suited her best, recommending she give up the bow and arrow she had persisted with for years and consider changing her profession, just like me. Initially, Chai Nayun thought I would comfort her, so she was taken aback for a moment. By the time she finished reading the message, Kim Suho and others had found her. When Kim Suho tried to comfort her, he found that Chai Nayun was infuriated by my words, as my message ruthlessly denied her years of effort. Thus, the first subject duel of the Cube midterm exams came to an end. Back in the dorm, I opened the drone footage and saw Cheek Zhengyan's brutal actions. He didn't hesitate at all when he struck purely to amuse himself. In this world, there are indeed such people who can do such things, but unlike ordinary lawbreakers, they possess powers far beyond ordinary humans. I can no longer just be wary of the villains from the original novel, as the novel has been adapted by the co-author, and new villains could appear at any time. The next day, the midterm exams monster battle began. The examiner this time was one of the magicians, Jin Jua. Next, we would battle the magical creatures she summoned in the arena below. These creatures have the same attacking power as monsters and won't disappear immediately even if the summoning is cancelled, so she reminded everyone to surrender immediately if they feel unable to continue the exam. The assessment isn't necessarily about defeating the creatures, but is scored based on how long one can last and how calmly one can handle the situation. After explaining the rules, the groups were formed. Soon, the first group went down to wait for their test, but the students not undergoing the test were not idle. The examiner told everyone to analyze the battlefield and write a report about this monster battle. Just then, someone's smartwatch rang, and immediately, the examiner asked everyone to turn off their smartwatches. Lastly, Jin Jua stated that the reports would also account for a part of the written test score, thus everyone should take it seriously. After finishing, she announced the start of the monster removal battle. The first group, Suzuki, was ready to face her challenge. The creature assigned to her was an advanced ghoul. As Suzuki fought, the students on the platform watched closely. When the first group's test ended, it was time for the second group of students to take their turn. Unlike the battles of Hazuki and others, the top-ranked talents like Li Yanghan directly defeated the summon monsters upon releasing their magic power. Chai Nayun's battle was also easy. Finally, after some waiting, it was time for my group, Group 10, to enter. I was assigned a Chrome Wolf. Facing this close combat powerful summon monsters, I chose the most conservative tactic. Just when I thought I could finish smoothly, Immediately, sudden vibrations echoed through the examination field. Oh Junhyuk, patrolling nearby, heard the situation inside the arena too, and Seo Yangji in the monitoring room told him to be more attentive, given that a security patrol had been murdered before. Hence, they remained very alert for the rest of the exam. The heroes speculated that the source of the vibrations within the examination field was the seabed in the sea area near Oh Junhyuk. Just as he was about to investigate, he suddenly sensed a killing intent from behind. Cheek Jungyang of the Chameleon Troop had not evacuated. He was still inside the cube. Oh Junhyuk informed him that entry was forbidden to outsiders. Initially, Cheek Jungyang wanted to chat, but he suddenly rolled up his sleeves in a challenging manner, looking ready for trouble. Oh Junhyuk immediately drew his weapon. Just as they were about to engage in combat, the earlier vibrations occurred again. Feeling a formidable pressure, both turned to look at the sea, where a huge water tornado had risen, containing a terrifying monster. Meanwhile, inside the examination field, the examiners paused the exam, instructing all students to go outside for safety. I was also quite surprised, as this event did not occur in the original novel storyline, and the summon monsters I was supposed to battle had not been recalled yet, so I loudly called for the examiner, but no one was there. I immediately realized this was not a simple accident. It's very likely that one of the dispatched magicians was a jinn. Jin Jua definitely wasn't responsible, as she had already been seen, and there were no notifications of changes to the setting. However, I quickly remembered that my computer had not detected any character changes in this exam from the start. If that's the case, it meant that a completely new storyline appeared today. Meanwhile, in another part of the exam field, a man appeared in front of Rachel. He greeted her faintly, even calling her Princess Highness. The man's appearance completely surprised Rachel, indicating a new plotline that I was unaware of. The man's name was Sir Lancaster. After regaining her composure, Rachel asked him where he had been since the incident in L City years ago. Lancaster did not answer, but instead lifted his eerie eyes. Instantly, Rachel understood, and she accused Lancaster, the former Imperial Guard captain, of selling his soul to a jinn. Lancaster smiled and said that he had dedicated his soul to his country for his entire life. Finally, he was tragically betrayed and abandoned. He has found refuge with a new lord. Hearing this, Rachel no longer spoke much and immediately charged at Lancaster, intending to arrest him and take him back to her country. However, Lancaster did not dodge Rachel's attacks. Where the blade passed, only an illusionary smoke was left. Regretfully, he told Rachel that his body was elsewhere, and today he had only come to bring some gifts. Lancaster mentioned that the outside was very chaotic now, including the invading monsters, and the examiners had all gone out to face the enemy, so no one would come to help her. In B country, the royalty is always given priority for protection, but here, Rachel is just an ordinary person. He wondered if Rachel could survive on her own, starting his revenge for past tragedies. Although he wanted to talk more with the princess, he was out of time, and Lancaster turned and left directly. As he faded away, a terrifyingly powerful assassin had emerged. Upon meeting, the assassin instantly drew his sword and approached so quickly that Rachel could barely react. The assassin was very strong, and Rachel tried to distance herself, but the speed of his sword strikes was too fast to see clearly. Even if she barely blocked a few, Rachel still suffered multiple cuts. After the exchange, she realized she could not defeat him head-on, so she gambled on finding a weakness. She calmly observed the assassin's movements, looking for an opportunity. In an instant, she dodged using her agility. The blade's edge grazed her shoulder, but she also managed to leave a deep gash on the assassin's side. Taking advantage of the assassin's momentary hesitation from the pain, Rachel quickly created distance, gasping for breath, ready for the next round of attack and defense. Rachel knew that only by finding his weakness could she completely defeat this formidable enemy. Soon, the assassin's blade overwhelmed her defenses, and even her sword was knocked away. Just as the assassin prepared to finish Rachel, her hand secretly moved. Unknown to the assassin, Rachel's sword was connected by a thin wire. The next second, as the assassin struck, she controlled the sword to block this attack. At the crucial moment, the wall behind them was suddenly breached, distracting both. Seeing another person from a different field emerge, the assassin immediately abandoned the now defenseless Rachel and turned to kill the one who had broken through the wall. Seeing this, my power instantly activated, and I spent SP to convert my Desert Eagle into shotgun mode. At such a close distance, combined with the special effects of my terrifying shot, the assassin was instantly obliterated. The bullet that hit him consumed 250 SP, and its power was as expected. Looking at my figure, Rachel also recognized that it was Kim Ha-jin, her classmate. Confirming there was no danger, I approached to inquire about her condition. Even without Rachel speaking, the wounds on her body told me it was serious. Fortunately, I carried first aid supplies, so I began to bandage her up. During this, she couldn't help but cry out in pain, and I reminded her to endure a little longer, as her hand might never wield a sword again if not treated promptly. After finishing, I looked at the blood-stained bandage and suddenly realized that I had unwittingly obtained the blood of a top student from the cube. While Rachel was thanking me, I hurriedly hid the bandage behind me. After resting for a while, it seemed the outside battle had ended, and the examiner Jin Jua also rushed over. She was about to take us up when another magician hurried over to inform that 2 students were seriously injured in the neighboring examination room. Hearing this, Jin Jua's expression turned grave, realizing that there was foul play behind this accident. By evening, the incidents at the examination site had largely been resolved, but Oh Junhyuk was sitting disheartened by the sea. Seo Yangji successfully found him and, confirming that he was unharmed, she inquired about the sudden occurrences. Oh Junhyuk was unclear about the reasons, but he mentioned he had been driven away by by the invaders. Although unsure who had angered them, Jichu and Jing had repelled the monsters with brute force, which had also frightened Oh Junhyuk. He speculated that this person was likely the killer of the security guard. This exam involved not only mysterious invaders, but also numerous high-level monsters. Oh Junhyuk realized that the cube would probably be held accountable by various parties. The next day, news of the cube exam incident spread globally. The midterm exams were consequently postponed due to the administration needing to explain externally and repair the venues, leading to the cancellation of scheduled exams and classes, giving the students an unprecedented 10-day holiday. As the instructors scolded everyone for only caring about discussing the holidays, a notification finally arrived on my computer in my backpack. The co-author's change notification was regrettably late. It had increased the capabilities of a character, Lancaster, setting him up as a more dangerous figure. His adjustment included increased probabilities of attacking Rachel and an enhancement in strength. Lancaster was a character I had designed related to Be Country, intended to overturn the entire country. Originally, Lancaster was supposed to appear later as a significant antagonist, but now he had made an early appearance. Not only had he appeared much earlier, but he had also become stronger. However, yesterday's events turned out to be good for me, as I had obtained Rachel's blood. I was thinking of feeding it to Evangel when I returned, when suddenly someone elbowed me in the head. Turning around, it was Chai Nayun, who appeared quite smug, clearly doing it on purpose. To other students, our friction seemed commonplace, and I didn't take Chai Nayun's actions to heart. Now in her dorm room, her mood significantly improved, even calling me a coward, clearly provoking me despite not daring to confront her directly. At that moment, Chai Nayun's smartwatch received a message. It was the analysis report of the exam. She eagerly opened the reports, many of which discussed her. Kim Suho was the first. His comments on Chai Nayun were very inspirational. He believed that despite many factors recently diminishing her confidence, he still saw her as a talented archer. Kim Suho was confident that if Chai Nayun continued to believe in herself and improve as she did during the exam, she would eventually become the best hero. Watching Kim Suho's lengthy encouragement, Chai Nayun read it all and ended up feeling quite shy, as it was the first time someone had encouraged and praised her like this. Chai Nayun decided, no matter what others say, she would steadfastly remain an archer. Chai Nayun continued to read other people's reports. However, the next one was anonymous and also quite lengthy, so she happily started reading. When she saw the content, Chai Nayun was initially stunned, then her whole body trembled with anger because this anonymous comment was written by me. Unlike Kim Suho's encouragement, my lines were full of criticisms saying she was completely unsuitable for archery and her performance in the exam was full of flaws. After reading, Chai Nayun exploded in rage, loudly cursing me in the dormitory. Meanwhile, in another part of the dorm, I had placed Evangel's seed on the bandage, which soon began absorbing the blood on it. Seeing this, I thought the seed should grow well. If fed with human blood, it could nurture the real witch Evangel. Rachel comes from a great bloodline, so I think the witch hatched from her blood wouldn't turn out to be a villain. I just have to wait for Evangel to grow quickly, so she can help me in the future. But as I was imagining her future appearance, my heart suddenly began to beat violently, accompanied by pain on my wrist. Unexpectedly, the second stigma chose this moment to appear. The pain of the stigma's etching made me scream in agony. The next morning, I contacted Park Soo-hyuk to go to the hunting grounds early, still in severe pain in my wrist and looking quite haggard from a lack of sleep the night before. Seeing this, Park Soo-hyuk was curious about what was wrong with me. After telling him it was nothing, we started talking about the recent business. Park Soo-hyuk mentioned how, thanks to me, having a hunting vehicle not only made running errands more convenient than before but also reassured the clients a lot. Upon arriving at the entrance to the hunting ground, I noticed it was crowded with many people, mostly from guilds. The crowd of onlookers was also attracted by these guild members, who represent the essence of straight, and leading them was none other than Yuyona. Seeing her, I was also surprised. She must have brought her guild members to scout the hunting ground. Noticing someone staring at her, Yuyona turned her head and saw me in the car. She then approached me, curious about what I was doing at the hunting ground. Yuyona coming over to greet me was unexpected, and I told her I was here to earn some extra money, and I was with my agent Park Soo-hyuk. Hearing this, Yuyona turned to look at Park Soo-hyuk. In the original story, Park Soo-hyuk becomes Kim Suho's agent. After learning this, Yuyona invested a lot of money in SH Entertainment, which turned out to be very successful, leading both to successful careers. But that's the content of the original novel. Without the banner of Kim Suho, SH Entertainment probably doesn't hold much value in Yuyona's eyes. It seems I've become an obstacle for Park Soo-hyuk now. At that moment, realizing I was actually here to hunt, Yuyona suddenly pulled open the car door and sat next to me. She thought, since I was here to hunt, she might as well come in and have a look first. Despite my confusion, I agreed to go to the hunting ground together. On the way, I wondered what Yuyona was up to, but she spoke first, asking if I had considered my future. Hearing me say it was too early to think about it, Yuyona explained it wasn't too early at all, since we had just finished our midterms, and by the third year we would leave school to become trainee heroes, so we should start planning for graduation as soon as possible. Then she finally revealed her purpose, which was to invite me to join the Essence of Straight. Yuyona was very sincere, stating that although the Essence of Straight couldn't compare to the creator's sacred grace, she believed that once she became the leader, she could make the Essence of Straight the top guild. If I was willing to join, she could provide any resources I needed, from high-end weapons to well-known agents. Yuyona thought these offers were attractive enough since I was still a student, but I changed the subject, telling Yuyona that contacting prospective heroes in advance could result in a fine. Hearing this, she laughed and said, "Do you think I can't afford that little amount of money?" The hunting vehicle suddenly braked hard, causing her to bump into the seat. Immediately, Yona angrily asked why the sudden stop. Park Soo-hyuk stammered that we had reached the area where monsters lurk. His comment surprised Yona. She hadn't expected an ordinary agent to know about monster hotspots. Park Soo-hyuk explained that April is when monsters in the deeper parts of the hunting ground get restless, forcing the weaker ones to flee to the periphery. He considered my skills as a sharpshooter and specifically chose this hunting spot. This information was from Park Soo-hyuk's personal field research, and he said it could be trusted. I also took the opportunity to boast to Yona that Park Soo-hyuk was an excellent agent. After greeting them, I went down to start hunting. As for Yona, her guild members would soon arrive here too. As I got out of the car, Yona came back to knock on the window and also asked for Park Soo-hyuk's business card.